Hello and welcome to this video tutorial brought to you by Tutvid.com. Today we're going to take a look at how to create these sort of colored streaks which you would typically make coming off of an athlete or somebody or something that's in motion, something where you really want to emphasize motion and maybe show off, hey, look at what this can do, or look at how this person moves, or whatever, just something that's in motion. You can create these really cool sort of colored streaks that are floating or shooting off of their body, almost like something that is coming off the back of a jet or something. So that's what we're going to take a look at creating. Matter of fact, we're going to create this entire image you see here in the following video. We're going to start with this image right here of this snowboarder, and you can download this image from the link. I've got a link in the video description. You can just click that. It'll bring you to this image. You can download this image and follow along and do exactly as I do and hopefully achieve nearly the same exact results. The techniques we're using, however, are always going to yield different results depending on what you end up getting, because of this one particular step. There's a bit of it never comes out the same. So we're going to take a look at how to do that. We're going to start with this image, and let's get going right now. We're going to grab the crop tool, and I want to make sure this is set to 740 by 415. You can see I've preset it here, 740 by 415 pixels. And I'm going to just click and drag across this image to cut him out, or to cut out a chunk of this image, basically just to resize the image down to a size that's more manageable for my screen size at this point. There we go. So now this is him at 100%. The next thing we need to do is cut the snowboarder off of this blue background. I typically don't use the magic wand tool, but in this case I'm going to. So I'm going to select the magic wand tool, and you want to bring the tolerance up to something maybe around 80. So I believe the default is 32. We're going to work with 80. I'm going to select the dark blue, and you can see it really grabs a whole bunch of the blue. I'm going to shift click down here on the light blue that it didn't grab, and there we go. We have a very nice selection around our snowboarder. Problem is we're selecting the blue, not the actual snowboarder. So I want to hold Command Shift or Control Shift I to invert that selection. Now we have the selection running around our snowboarder. I'm now going to go select Refine Edge. And for this, I recommend that you set this to preview your selection over a white background. And the feather, I want it to be about half a pixel. And then expand, contract, we're going to say negative 30% or thereabout. Radius is going to be about a half pixel. Try half pixel, that looks pretty good. And contrast 20%. Smoothing is going to be set to 0%. So there we go, hit OK. And we now have our selection. I'm going to hit Command or Control J to pop him up onto his own layer. Now we want to create a layer beneath him to basically drop our first background. So in order to create a layer beneath quickly without just selecting this layer and hitting New Layer, you can leave the layer you have selected and just hold down the Control or the Command key if you're on the Mac and hit Create New Layer. It creates a new layer beneath. What I'm going to do now is double click on my colors. Here, my color picker. And I'm going to choose a very dark red, so all the way down here, very, very dark red. Hit OK. And I'm going to hit Alt or Option Backspace or Delete, depending again on whether or not you're on a Mac or PC, to fill that layer with that very dark red. Now that we've filled this layer with the dark red, you can see there are some specks of snow, which really we don't have to worry about them. Those will kind of disappear in what we end up doing later here. If we look, you can see we have all of this stuff shooting around the snowboarder. But we have this little bit of jacket mess up here, and there's still a little bit of sky you can see here behind his leg. So we want to select the snowboarder, and typically I would use a mask to do this, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to zoom in on him and grab the eraser tool right there and just erase this stuff away. So there we go, get rid of that entire area up there, and it looks like there's a little bit of residual stuff there. And then right in here, we're just going to quickly just paint in there. And I'm just using my mouse, so it's a little rougher than it would normally be. But there we go. We now have him cut out, and that took less than 5 minutes to chop him out and get him onto his own layer with a background behind him. All right, the next step is create a new layer above this red beneath the snowboarder. So again, Control, Command, click the New Layer button, grab the Gradient tool, and I'm going to click on my Gradient Editor. Now, look at this strange gradient I have. The reason I have this gradient is because my gradient type is set to noise, whereas normally it is set to solid. You can see this is probably what you're accustomed to seeing. Choose noise, however, and this is what you're going to have. You're going to have all three of these handles all the way up like so. I tend to like to work with one color, and my color of choice is green. I don't really know why. Maybe it's because I can see green better as far as everything I want. Greens tend to be nice and bright and light and all sorts of good stuff like that. So I'm just going to work with green, and we're going to change the color later. That's the wonderful thing about this, is we can change the color later, and we don't have to worry about that. Again, restrict colors is not checked on. I don't know if I mentioned that a second ago or not, but restrict colors not checked on, and roughness set to 50%. I'm going to hit the randomize button. This is the part that is kind of random, hence the word randomize, and really you're not going to get the same gradient as me. I'm not going to get the same gradient as you. But here's the kind of gradient I'm looking for. Something that has a lot of lights and a few darks, but nothing that's too bright and nothing that's too dark. And by too dark is basically stuff that's just, you know, like this. This is obviously too dark, and this is too bright. So we want stuff that's in between. This is too dark, too dark, too dark. That's okay, maybe more dark than I want, too dark, too bright, too dark. And you just keep looking through until we get something. Let's keep clicking until we find something we like. You probably have found something by now. I think I'm going to go with this one right here. And again, this is all randomized, so you're probably not going to get the same thing as me. I'm going to hit OK. And I'm going to start here over here on the left-hand side. I'm just going to hold down my Shift key, and I'm going to click and drag straight across to the right to apply that gradient right onto our document. The next thing I want to do is colorize this gradient. So I'm going to hit Command or Control U to bring up my hue saturation dialog box and slide the hue slider to the left. I'm going to start seeing orange and then finally red, and the red is what I want. I'm going to up the saturation a little bit and hit OK. I'm going to hit Command or Control J to duplicate this red layer and shut off the first of the red layers. Matter of fact, I'm going to double click on that layer and name it red BG for red background, and I'm going to double click on the layer beneath that and name it solid BG for solid background, because those two layers are going to combine to make our final background. This streaking layer is actually going to be the first step to creating our streak effect behind the snowboarder. So I'm actually going to duplicate this layer once more because this red is going to just be the base, and I'm going to hit Command or Control U now that I have a second copy of that red layer, and I want to make this orange, so I'm going to slide the hue slider back toward the right, not the left, the right. I'm going to make this very light, and I'm going to saturate it, make sure it's very orangey. I'm going to lighten it up even more, and again make sure it's very, very orange, like so. Hit OK. So I've got my orange and my red. Now what I'm going to do with the orange layer is go Layer, Layer Style, Blending Options, and I want to use these Blend If sliders. I want to hold my Alt or Option key, and by holding the Alt or Option key you split a slider, and I'm going to split the top white slider here. I'm just going to start pulling it over till I can really see a lot of red coming back into this image. I can see there's a lot of red coming back into the image, and if I take it back you can see there's the original orange. If I drag the black over, you can see it really starts to make a different kind of change, which actually maybe we would like more. So you can play with your blend if sliders. I'm definitely going to stick to the top. I think I'm going to go with the black slider here, and that looks very cool. Maybe pull it over even more than that. There we go. I'm going to hit OK, and there's without the orange, there's with the orange. So we've really made a big change to our image already. What I'm going to do now is just a little bit tricky. It might be a little, it's not tricky to actually do, but it might be a little tricky to follow. I'm going to duplicate this red layer that's visible here, the red streaking layer, Command or Control J. I'm going to drag it up on top of the orange layer. I'm going to now desaturate this layer. The hotkey for desaturating anything is Control Shift or Command Shift U. There we go, quickly desaturate it. And I want to increase the contrast of this, so I'm going to bring up my Levels dialog box. That's Command or Control L. Levels. We're going to bring some more blacks into this image, really bring the blacks up, and now we want to drag the white slider over to really bring whites in until we almost have some solid whites. There we go, like that. Looks great. Now what I'm going to do with this is hit Command or Control T to transform this top layer. I'm going to right click on this and just hit Flip Horizontal. There we go. Hit the check key to commit those changes, and we're going to set this layer to the blend mode of screen. You can see that we've just introduced a lot of white to our streaking effect. So now this is going to be our final streaking effect. What we now want to do before we go any further is select all these layers and merge them. However, if you want to save them, let's say for future use, if you want to remember how you did this, you can simply group them, Command or Control G. And by the way, I selected them all just by selecting the top one, holding the Shift key, and clicking the bottom one. Command or Control G to group them, and drag that group down and drop it on the New Layer button. So now we have two copies of this. Just select the one on the bottom, double click it. Let's name it Streaks Master. There we go. And we can just shut that off, so it's not really going to be in our way. The group on top, I'm just going to select and hit Command or Control E to merge that group into its own layer. Double click that and name it streaks. There we go. Now, before we actually go ahead and begin making our streak effect, as far as positioning it and warping it and making it look like it's shooting off of the snowboarder, we want to position the snowboarder. So I'm going to select the snowboard layer, as I just did, hit the V key to grab our move tool, and we're just going to drag this guy down, maybe and toward the right a little bit more. We want to really show off the streak effect above him. There we go. Now I'm going to grab the streaks layer, hit Command or Control T, and I'm going to drag from the right side first into the edge of his hand. You want to pick an edge. In this case, for me, it's going to be this whole contour line from fingertip to fingertip and up along his head. That's where the streaks are going to be coming out of. I could make them coming out of his snowboard and make it go straight up from there if I wanted. You can really pick any part of the athlete or the person or thing that is in motion to make these streaks come from. In this case, I'm just doing the arms because that's kind of like the widest area, and you know, it looks pretty cool. So I'm going to pull the left side in to meet up with the left fingertip here. And there we go. I'm going to hit the Enter key to commit those changes. Now what we need to do is use a mask to mask off everything beneath this top line where I want these streaks to come from. So what I want to do, make sure we have the streaks layer selected and hit the Add New Layer Mask button at the bottom of the Layers panel. There we go. There's a new layer mask. Grab the brush tool, right click, and choose maybe a 28 or 32 pixel hard-edged brush. And we're going to begin painting away. And by the way, I'm painting with black. Right here. So painting with black. We're painting all of this stuff away down here on the bottom, and my flow is set to 36%. We want to set the flow to 100%, like so. Be very careful around these fingertips that you don't erase above them. You only want to erase beneath them. So erase all of this stuff away. Make sure you get behind that leg there, around that fingertip, and there we go. We now only have the streaks coming from the top of his head and the back of his arms, essentially. So now that we've done that, we want to add a little bit more pop to these streaks, and we can do that a number of ways. However, we should probably transform this first. So let's do that first. Select the streaks layer and make sure you actually have the layer selected, not the layer mask, and hit Command or Control T and right click on this free transform box and hit warp. Now with the warping, we're going to grab these two top handles. We're going to start with the top left and just pull it over in toward the middle. And we're going to grab the top right and we're going to pull that in toward the middle. Now that we've done that, notice that it pulls this streaking off of his actual fingertips. So see these two lines coming up out of the bottom handle? This handle here, and then there's one on the other side. We're going to pull them over to make sure or ensure that this still meets up with his fingertip. So we want this line here to be going right across the tip of his finger. And the same with this guy over here. There we go. And if when you do this, you reveal any of this streaking anywhere, just make sure you come back into your layer mask here and just paint it right away. No big deal at all. So I'm going to select these streaks now, and we want to add some more punch to these streaks. And we're going to do that by duplicating this layer. So I'm going to hit Command or Control J to duplicate the layer, and I'm just going to set it to soft light. You can see that it really gives us some really strong colors here coming out of our streaks. It's very nice. And I'm now going to merge these two layers. So I'm going to select them both and hit Command or Control J to merge them. Actually, we're going to duplicate this once more. I'm thinking ahead here. Command or Control J to duplicate that and just shut it off. We're going to select these two bottom streaks and merge them. Command or Control E. So there we go. We have now merged them into their own layer, and we're going to apply a layer mask to this layer. So apply a layer mask there, and grab the brush tool again. This time we're going to choose a preset, maybe a 100 pixel soft edged brush, and we're going to set the flow down around 40. Painting with black. Make sure you're painting on the layer mask. That's kind of important. We're going to start painting away up here at the top to make these streaks sort of fade out. I'm going to sort of make them fade out on an angle. You can see how sort of fading out on the same angle that he is coming in at. So very cool little effect there. Next, I'm going to turn the other streaks back on up here on top, and they're still set to soft light. I'm going to set them to normal, and you can see it kind of kills everything we just did. Don't worry, we're actually not using it for up there. We're going to use it to cover our snow border. So what I want to do is select the layer mask and just drag it to the garbage. Drag it and drop it on the garbage can. It's going to say, hey, would you like me to apply this layer mask before removing it? And I'm going to say no, just delete it. Don't apply the layer mask because that's going to apply a permanent change to the layer. We want all of these pixels that are being covered up. So just delete that layer mask and give me everything like it has done here. So what I'm going to do next is control click on the snow border layer. Now I'm still on the streaks copy layer. And I'm going to just hit Command or Control J to pop that up onto its own layer. I can now delete the streaks copy layer. And this layer 2 here, which I'm just going to call border streaks, I'm going to drag that on top of my snow border layer. This here is the snow border layer, by the way. Snow border. So you can see that what we've done is we've just copied those streaks of color that cover our snow border. And the reason we've done that is because we want to apply this color almost as if this snowboarder is being electrified by these beams and streaks of light that are shooting off of him. So I'm going to turn this layer on and set it to overlay. And you can see it gives me a very cool effect. However, now that we've done that, it really accentuates the green around his neck, his hood, and the yellow and green on his goggles. So I'm going to select the snowboarder layer, hit Command or Control U, and we're going to choose from this master drop-down menu. We're going to choose greens first, and we're going to shift them. We're going to shift to the left here until I see some red or orange coming in, just like so. And I'm going to choose the yellows as well, and we're going to shift over until we see some yellow and or orange, maybe even some red coming into that yellow. So we're going to hit OK, and there we go. That looks much, much better. So the last step of this tutorial is just sort of like the odds and ends. We're going to turn that red background layer on again. We actually might want to slightly tint it orange due to the fact that our sort of streaks have come out so orange. So we're just going to bring it back a little bit. There we go, sort of a very reddish orange. Hit OK. Or before we hit OK, maybe desaturate it just a little bit, then hit OK. And we could try setting this to something like overlay or soft light. That might look kind of cool. Overlay looks kind of neat. Let's try hard light before we call it quits. Hard light's pretty neat. There's normal as opposed to hard light. You know what, I think I like overlay. Maybe duplicate it with overlay, Command or Control J. No, that definitely doesn't work. Drag that to the garbage. And we're just going to leave that red BG layer on overlay. So the next thing we want to do is add sort of like a fake snow underneath his snowboard. We don't really care if this snow looks real. We're going for this is a totally fake effect kind of look. Like, you know that this guy obviously is not surfing or snowboarding with these streaks coming out of him. So we're just going to really go out on a limb and make it look kind of crazy. So what I'm going to do is choose a hard-edged, maybe 18 or 19 pixel brush. Yeah, something about that size. 18 pixel works pretty nicely. And I'm going to open up the brush options by clicking this little icon right up here. And I'm going to come over here to Shape Dynamics, and I'm going to check that on. I'm going to set Size Jitter 100% and Angle Jitter to 100%. I'm also going to set that to pen pressure so I can use my tablet. I'm then going to turn Scattering on, and I'm going to scatter it quite a bit, maybe around 400, 450, and leave the count at 1. Again, the scattering is going to be controlled by pen pressure. So collapse this, and we want to create a new layer above everything. So I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to paint with white. So I'm going to hit X to switch my foreground and background colors. My foreground color is now white, and I'm going to grab my pen, and by pen I meant my stylus here on for my tablet, and I'm going to begin painting. Note here I also have my flow set to 40%. We will try that and see what that looks like, and that looks pretty cool. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to start back here, and we're going to start drawing across the image like so. Just sort of drawing a little bit of snow, and then maybe some snow that will be flying off the front. There we go, like so. And then the snow will be a bit heavier toward the back. There we go. Something sort of just like that. And I'm going to duplicate this layer now, Command or Control J, and I'm going to shut off the top layer. I'm going to select the layer that is actually on. It's this layer right here, layer 1. And I'm going to go Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and I'm going to blur this between 5 and 7 pixels. Let's try 5. 5 actually looks pretty good. Hit OK. I'm going to turn the top layer back on. You can see it really gives sort of that glowing effect. Now, if you did want to color this snow, select the blurred layer, okay? hit Command or Control U, and hit Colorize, and bring the dark or the lightness down, so it's going to become darkness. Up the saturation, and you can see we're making some red snow. Maybe we'll make some orange snow. That doesn't look all that bad. Bring the saturation way up, maybe brighten it up a little bit more, hit OK. Then turn the white layer back on top of it, the non-blurred layer that is, and try setting that to something like overlay. That looks pretty cool. We're going to leave it right there on overlay. And you can see it's a very cool effect that we have just created here with this snow border, with these light streaks coming out of him, with this fake glowing snow. And the last thing you might want to do just to send it over the edge is apply a little bit of text. I'm going to grab the text tool here. And right up here, we're just going to use actually Arial. The font face I want to use is Arial. And black. We'll try 95 point. That might be cool. And we will say snow. This is all in caps. Board. Nope. We want to make sure here that we spell this correctly. Snowboard. There we go. I did graduate high school, I swear. So I'm going to bring this down, and I'm going to double click this and select this. Make it a bit smaller than it is. 72 points, 36 points, that's much better. Hit check, and set that up by the top corner. The color really doesn't matter because we're going to throw a couple layer styles on it. Go layer style, and the first thing we're going to do is give it a gradient overlay. And this is a pretty cool way to style text that's sitting over a colored background. I'm going to double click my gradient editor here, and I do want my top color to be white. My bottom color, however, I do not want to be black. I want it to be a medium gray. But I want it to be a medium gray that is being influenced by the color around it. So what I'm going to do is choose, let's say, one of these bright oranges from the streaks. You can see now it's bright orange. I definitely don't want that. What I'm going to do is choose a color somewhere in between this point where this orange is now and this 50% gray point right over here. So something like this right here. So you can see that it's not quite gray. It's almost like a tan. I want it to be a little more gray than that. There we go. Something like that. Hit OK. And choose OK again. We're going to apply a little stroke to this. 1 pixel stroke. Position we will set to inside, and it's going to be a dark gray, like so. Hit OK. And, well, you know, let's make it a lighter gray than that. Something more like that. Hit OK, and we're going to throw a drop shadow, which is really going to behave a lot more like an outer glow because the way we're going to use it. Set the blend mode to normal. Give it a nice orange. It's just going to be orange, just like that. Hit OK. Angle will be 90. Opacity, we'll edit that in a second. The distance, we're going to set that to 20. We want it to be on an angle, by the way, of 90 degrees, so it's coming straight down. You can see that this almost looks like we've written snowboard twice. However, the size, we're going to bump up to about 30. And you know what? Let's move it a little bit closer. Let's make it 15, and the size, let's reduce that to 20. There we go. And now we'll just reduce the opacity a little bit, so we just sort of have this, some kind of an orange glow, sort of just illuminating the bottom of our text. We're going to hit OK. And there is our finished product. So it took a little while to do, but you can see that it's a pretty cool finished effect. And that is how you create these kind of streaking color streaks, which you can use all over the place. You can use them to build images. You can use them in images of your own to make cool effects for websites, all kinds of different things. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I certainly hope you learned something. And thank you very much for watching it. Please go check out the site. That's www.tutvid.com.